Hello, I'd like to talk about a concept concerning the nature of reality. As a structure for this concept, let's consider a maze. For instance, have you ever wondered what a rat, for instance, might experience going through a maze? Struggling, as it were, to get all the way through the maze from one end to the other? First of all, it's primarily concerned with the prerequisites or the parameters of the maze. Now we know that this maze has been created by a creator outside who is able to control the parameters of this maze. So he's already figured out what it is that he wants his subject, i.e. the rat, to achieve. Initially, let's say he wanted to make the rat go from A to Z and struggle through all these blind alleys, as it were, to get to this eventual point on the opposite end of this long, meandering, chaotic maze and reach that little bit of foodstuffs at the end. Well, let's say that this particular rat, and here I'm thinking in terms of the human condition as we struggle with reality as a whole, since this is an analogy for life in general, struggles to find his way through this maze. You can see how frustrated and erstwhile he might be, caught up as he is in this bind, in this trap, so to speak, like a person in the hypercube, for instance, trying to find his way out of the hypercube and only finding himself at another point in the maze of the hypercube, in which one door closes while another one opens up, and then he has to find his way around that and onward through the maze until he finally, in the final act, and here I'm referring again to the rat as he makes his way through the maze, is able to get to the end of the maze and get his just reward, the food at the other end of the maze. Let's say that he finally is able to figure out the maze, just like the person entrapped in the hypercube might eventually work out the details, like in the movie The Hypercube. They were able to kind of figure the whole thing out by putting numbers at each one of the doors and then figuring out which ones went where, and then eventually calculating in a kind of a making an assessment of the general direction and location of these exits and entry points, and figure out exactly where they're at and where not to go, so that eventually they could pretty much find their way through it, like a person caught in an underground cavern and trying to figure their way out. If you don't mark your way as you go, then you become hopelessly lost in the maze of the labyrinth. But let's say again, get back to our rat, that he did figure this out. Eventually he was able to, in a very frustrating and arduous way, figure his way out through the maze and achieve in the end result getting to the reward at the end of the maze and fulfilling his need, which was essentially biological, like the human being caught in the whole reality trap here in the physical plane. The whole thing seems to focus our full attention, as it were, on the object of survival, how to get through it and or survive to reach the necessary foodstuffs and maintain the well-being that we have to get through it, and eventually find that sense of well-being that's in it. Well, this same rat it's a good metaphor for it, because this same rat or this same cat, this human cat, this being that we are, has to find his way through the maze and get to that end reward, that just reward that's at the end, and fulfill his basic needs or necessities, i.e., survival, self-preservation. But what then? Let's say that he does. Let's say the person finds their way through the hypercube. What's on the other side? What's on the other side of the maze? What's on the other side of this reality is the question. Are we just simply as ensconced within a maze, as it were? Or is there an outside to this maze? Is there an outside, another dimension, just beyond the hypercube? Is there what happens to the red when he's able to get all the way through there and fulfill his basic needs? Well, let's examine what happens to him as he does it. What occurs is that he's able to, say, fulfill his basic needs. He's able to get the food that he needs and maintain his well-being. Somehow he's figured out the maze and remembered all the entry and exit points and knows exactly how to get from A to B, provided that the creator of the maze hasn't changed any of the prerequisites or parameters, and get his food lying at the opposite end. What takes place then? He sits and he contemplates his reality just like we do. What happens when we're able to fulfill our basic needs? We have a little bit of time left over to contemplate the nature of our particular reality that we find ourselves in, and maybe figure a way around it or beyond it or through it, shall we say, so that we don't have to continue going through it in the same way. This is the essence of religion and all philosophical thinking, that basically they're looking for a way beyond basic self-preservation and survival and all the essential needs of getting from A to B or from life to death through the trap, and fulfilling all these essential prerequisites, and then stopping and trying to contemplate how to go beyond it. What lies beyond? Well, in the physical plane, we're kind of caught within a 3D reality, encased within a 4D reality. What does this mean? This means as long as we're pretty much involved in the 3D reality, that is, like the rat caught in the maze, getting from A to B, time flows in a pretty much of a linear fashion. Once you start reaching the point where you're no longer ingrained or immersed totally within the linear project of getting from A to B, you don't have much time to really think about the nature of this particular reality. But when you do, suddenly you find yourself in what? Fourth dimension. Same way that the person in a hypercube might find themselves in a hypersphere. Now that sounds like another dilemma, doesn't it? Because what they do is they suddenly discover themselves above or outside of the general flow of space-time. They find themselves in a totally new dimension, a dimension of time. Finding themselves in a dimension of time is finding themselves in a dimension of mind space or psi. That's a place in which you contemplate your reality and reflect upon it, and you think about where it is that you are ensconced, where you are caught up. You suddenly become aware of the nature of your particular struggle, of your particular nature of your life. And as you do, you actually enter into another space, another zone above and beyond and outside of your normal flow. This in a sense is an exit point, and when you reach it, you no longer can come back to the same space and time that you were involved in here in the physical